The HR Stories podcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories helps businesses and nonprofits better manage the employee experience, providing the tools, training, and resources they need to take their organization to the next level. Each week on the HR Stories podcast, management and HR consultants John Thalheimer and Chuck Simikian dive into the stories that matter to small business owners, nonprofit leaders, and HR professionals. We continue to be amazed at how companies allow poor decision-making, lack of knowledge, or in some cases, hubris to cause harm to their organizations. Each week, we discuss stories where companies must pay large fines, lose great talents, and even stain their reputation within the community. And then we tell you how to avoid the same fate. Welcome to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story. In this week's episode, John and Chuck talk about the third-party sexual harassment. But first, here's what's happening in the HR news.
I love the HR news segment. I love telling stories, but I love HR news, John, because we get to tell even more mini stories. Hi, folks. I'm Chuck, with co-host of the HR Stories podcast, and with me is...
I am John. I'm the other co-host. Wow, I didn't know you were throwing to me this morning. How are you doing this morning, Chuck? How's life going?
I know. Sorry, listeners. We try and keep it a little lively here, and I changed things up for John this morning, and I'm sure he'll return the favor tenfold later in this broadcast, or perhaps as we move forward. Anyways, I'm doing great, John. Excited to be here today. You know, we're at episode 45 of the HR Stories podcast, and I want to thank our listeners. We have hundreds and hundreds of downloads every week, and we're getting more and more. It's just very exciting to see all of the excitement around HR Stories podcast and the team at HR Stories, which is a lot of the other things we do, John, obviously more than just this podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I love getting that email from Buzzsprout, who hosts our podcast, saying, you've had this many downloads this week. Always kind of go back there and look at that. And so we love that we're I don't want to say spreading the gospel. We're helping HR folks get better, right? We're helping people get better, and we love that. We love your comments. We love your reviews. We love your information. We love that you're asking us questions. We are now doing every other week. We're doing the question and answer segment, so we love that you guys are here listening to that as well. What stories do you have, Chuck, in the news?
Yeah, well, this is an intro. Well, today we're talking about sexual harassment in our main story. A little twist on sexual harassment, but I saw this sexual harassment story come up through the news, and it wasn't in the EEOC, it wasn't Department of Labor, it was Associated Press that came through, and it was an actress with roles in Guiding Light and Hunger Games. Her name is Allison McDaniel, and she recently filed a lawsuit in federal court in Rhode Island seeking $3.3 million in damages and unpaid back wages. And she's saying in the lawsuit that she was sexually harassed by the owner of a Rhode Island resort where she had been hired, get this, to work as a consultant. And so she's subjected, she says, to repeated sexual advances, attempts to kiss her on the mouth, requests for sexual favors, inappropriate touching, oogling, suggestive overtones. I guess the owner of this place, called the Preserve Sporting Club and Residences, Paul Mahaldi's, would do these things where he would say things and introduce her as, hey, this is my mistress. This is my future ex-wife. This is my new girlfriend. And he would make these sexual advances, and he retaliated against her when she refused these advances by failing to reimburse her for expenses.
Now, that's going to be an interesting story, right? Because we're only hearing one side right now.
Yes.
Doesn't sound like we're not hearing Paul's side of the story yet. And I think, that'll play out. Right. Again, we have to be careful. It's interesting that she was hired as a consultant. So was she a 1099 worker or was she an employee? And then how does that play out in that conversation, right? And so
Yeah.
typically and it's probably a contract, a lot of actors in Hollywood, when they're working in a movie, a lot of that is contractual labor, right? And so you're not being hired as an employee. That's a whole nother ball of wax. We don't need to talk about it, but again, right. Paying attention to it. And I think you and I have done a really good job. The team at HR Stories podcast has really done a good job, really bringing these issues to light and what we need to be doing as employers to make sure that we are not falling into these traps. And I got to say, I think, and I hear this a lot in my HR classes when I'm working with HR professionals, is what do I do if the owner is inappropriate?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What do I do? I'm an HR person. I'm not the owner. There's a lot of techniques that we can use, and we can, if you really want to get into it, we probably could spend more time on it. But for me, I always make sure that, one, is the owner aware that their actions are probably illegal, right? And so then I'm sharing stories about people that got in trouble doing similar things, news from the headlines, maybe the podcast, just to get them increasing their awareness. And if they still then feel like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. There was a case where this happened, and the HR person literally, what they did is they finally got fed up with it and went to them and said, look, this is illegal. You keep doing it, you're going to get your company in trouble, and made sure they documented that conversation. This company did get in trouble, and the owner was sued, right? Mm-hmm. And so the HR person protected themselves by making sure that they had documentation saying, look, I addressed it. I tried to do everything I can. Sometimes we just need to leave that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think reading between the lines here, specifically the EEOC covers employees. This person was hired as a spokesperson and paid $6,000 a month to be in commercials and videos. And she may not have been an employee, so maybe this is why it's ending up in court, because in the end, her beef is he failed to pay me when I refused his advances. So yeah, you're right. I'll be real interested to read the actual court documents once this goes through the system. So we'll keep an eye on that one.
That's good. That's great.
Yeah. What do you got today, John? What's going on?
So I was reading this story. It came out today that there is a new lawsuit against the United States Postal Service for employees being denied space to express breast milk and be forced to pump in mail trucks.
No. Okay.
Right. And this ties it directly into the new pump legal pump regulations that came back out in April, right? And so we have talked about that there. If you guys are interested in getting our checklist for that, just email us and we will make sure that you get that. Samantha can send that to you. But again, right, it's these individuals and the managers, and I maybe for sure, but I think with the new regulations, one of the group of people that was added was drivers, right? Truck drivers in particular, and mail carriers, right? And so I do think that maybe in the past, what the managers thought was legal, right? But now, because of the new law, it's no longer legal, and they haven't gotten that advice down from the top, down to their managers and supervisors. And, the supervisors are saying, well, just go back. None of them said go back into your truck. They're like, well, you have the bathroom and you have the locker room. You can do it in there. Well, one, bathroom is not allowed, right? Because it's, not allowed, right? For obvious reasons, I hope. Number two, they were in the locker room. It wasn't closed off, right? It wasn't locked. Other people were coming in and out. No, you need a private, secure location where you're not going to be interrupted. And so maybe that was okay. Maybe that's in the, again, in the guidelines, but it's no longer okay and needs to be addressed by the United States Postal Service. So they're being sued. Again, just a suit coming out. We haven't seen where it's going to go. My guess is they'll probably settle. and then have to do training for all of their supervisors and managers.
Yeah. And that's a difficult one. I've dealt with a garbage truck company as one of my clients, and they were trying to figure out how do we deal with our drivers that are female that could be breast pumping. We've got we've got Amazon drivers. So the law is not, it's clear that as far as what has to be provided, it's not clear on how to provide it. And I'm also surprised how few people still are like, what are you talking about? Pump Act. What do I have to do again? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we got to get out there. They need our checklist.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing is, I mean, I don't know, maybe because we're in it, in the HR role and in, management and leadership, it seems common sense. Like, again, right? You have this individual that has to do this, has to express milk, and why aren't you giving them the opportunity to do that? Like, why not? Like, what would stop you from doing that, right? And so, I don't know.
We'll follow that one too.
Yeah,
I can't wait to see where that goes.
Yeah. What else is going on, Chuck?
Well, there's still lingering, talk about lingering effects of COVID. But as far as retention and work from home and remote work and hybrid work, there are still controversies and conversations going on. So there's a recent poll by this group called the Conference Board, and they're saying they found out that on-site work requirements may worsen retention, making hiring more difficult, which I think you and I kind of knew that. And maybe because we are in it to win it, John, we see it all of the time. But we knew that. But these folks were able to put numbers with that. And they found out that voluntary turnover amongst on-site workers has increased to 26% in the last 6 months, which is twice the rate of increase among remote workers during this survey of clients and people that
surprise me.
Yeah. And they said 71% of the HR executives that they surveyed said they were mandating an on-site work policy, but are struggling to retain workers. And so they are now considering strategies to increase that on-site work. In comparison, only 46% of those employers that give workers a choice of where to work reported struggles. So not a huge difference, but it's like 25% difference there.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, I guess it is big. Yeah. And it's still enough to take notice. And look, remote and hybrid work is still a great feature to attract and retain talent. The VP of Human Capital for this conference board that did the survey summed it up that said, look, to attract talent and retain talent, that's C-suite, you need to develop policies that balance workplace flexibility and culture and social benefits of on-site work. But it says she said every organization's different, but hybrid work is likely the solution in many cases. So there we go. Drop the mic. It's just another notch in the belt for saying some sort of flexibility is needed.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, 100%, right? I think it's something, again, we know, right? There are some organizations by the very nature of what they do, they cannot do remote work.
You are correct.
Right? And like warehouse work, nurses, healthcare, right? You just can't do that, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to look at it. And I think one of the challenges we're all facing is that unemployment remains historically low. And so the average, I think the unemployment rate is like 3.5, maybe 3.7 right now, which is historically low. But I think what's the numbers that we're not hearing from that overall arching number is in the professional segment, unemployment's like 1 to 1.9%. That means if people have the option to work remote and that's what they want, you better give it to them because there's not many people looking for jobs right now. And so, again, I think it's an important thing to kind of build on there. I just want to add in that we have scheduled for September a employee retention workshop that will allow participants who come there. We will literally help you build a retention plan from start to finish. We'll talk about how we set goals, and then what we need to do. I think I go through 6, maybe 7 different areas that will help you increase your retention. And then you get to decide, okay, what is your goal in that area? And I will tell you, as Chuck said, flexibility is one of those things we talk about. But not only flexibility in terms of location, but flexibility in terms of when I work, flexibility in terms of what I do to an extent. All those things go into flexibility. And so kind of paying attention to that. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out, Chuck, as you're talking about that. And so if you go to our website, the team at hrstories.com, and go up to the right-hand corner up at the top, it says workshops. You can't miss it. Click on that and you'll see all of our workshops. The retention one is in there. I think it's the second one in line. I'm not 100% sure that, but go ahead and check that out for sure.
Yeah. And John, we've got some big news a couple weeks ago. The Department of Homeland Security dropped a new I-9. I know you had a very successful webinar that we did. We had a great amount of attendance, and that's now available on a recording. But is there anything you wanted to share about the I-9 news for our listeners today?
There's a lot of I-9 news, right? And so this is a big change. I don't know. I mean, I feel like, wow, didn't expect this. And there's so many different things, right? They've shrunk it down to one page. They made things more supplemental, so we don't have to do them unless, right? And so they made it, I think the process is a lot easier. One of the things, and this is a tease, so I definitely want you guys to go check out the workshop. But one of the things is we have been so pushing people to make sure that they never have the employees leave any of the boxes blank, right? That's all gone now. They're all, the United States Department of Homeland Security is like, yeah, leave them blank now. It's fine. Right? And so I think that's a big thing. They get rid of the preparer and translator boxes in there, and they make it down to one page. There is a way now to verify remotely. And so there is an E-Verify. If you're an E-Verify, there's definitely a way to do it remotely. And we go through that in the workshop. And there is a proposal, if you don't do E-Verify, how you can verify remote employees' documentation. So we'll get into that. We get all that into the workshop. So definitely come and download that. Again, same place. Go to our team at hrstories.com. Go up to the workshops. We will have it there. It will probably, I think we're going to put a heading in there on demand. So that's probably where it'll be. So we'll definitely check that out and see that. So I'm very excited. I think that workshop was well attended. There was lots of great questions, which are always surprising. I know when, Chuck, we've done one in the past, you were like, I can't believe they're asking these questions. But I think, again, you're small business owner, department of one, I think office managers, that's not your focus, right? And so again, like, how do I do this? Having a checklist may be beneficial for you on that. Absolutely.
Well, John, we've got a great story today, and I know you've got some input. You have a great story that rides on this. You've got some great input. So why don't we take a break, and then we'll come back to our story. You've been listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. Hey everybody, it's Chuck with the team at HR Stories. The HR Stories podcast provides weekly lessons along with compelling HR news in a storytelling format. But we have found our listeners want more. You know, we know it's easy to be overwhelmed managing the day-to-day responsibilities of HR. We know HR can be isolating. And our listeners want a supportive community to turn to for advice and inspiration. And we've been there. We know what it's like. And that's why John and I at the team at HR Stories have created a membership program that goes beyond the HR Stories podcast. Imagine an education support group for new and experienced HR professionals alike, with twice monthly sessions and an opportunity to collaborate and network with your peers. Whether you are an HR team of one or you have HR as a responsibility, our membership program is designed to offer benefits that will elevate your knowledge and advance your career. simply go to team@hrstories.com and click on the membership link in the top menu bar to learn more, or check out the link in the show notes below.
Welcome back to the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. Today, Chuck and I are talking about third-party sexual harassment. What does that mean, Chuck?
Well, John, as you and listeners know, we talk a lot about sexual harassment and how companies, messed up, shall we say, and it costs them money and reputation and more.
Yeah, in fact, right? I mean, we've had several great episodes on sexual harassment situations. In fact, we went back in our series of cases that changed HR. We talk about 2 or 3 of those in there as well, right? And so really important ones as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And in all those stories, we focus on a manager or a leader that acted inappropriately, or perhaps a company that allowed situations to occur with little or no intervention or repercussions.
Before we go on, let me make one thing clear. Why it wasn't inappropriate, it was also illegal, right?
Yes.
Right? Title 7 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as well as numerous court cases, have said that, in fact, there really is no gray area. It's illegal, and it's spelled out really clearly.
Yeah, it's very clear. It's very clear. Numerous writings and opinions and court cases. So absolutely, John. Thank you for correcting me on that.
Yeah, we're just trying to set up the kind of conversation today, right? And so there are 2 types of sexual harassment. There's the first type is that quid pro quo, right? Which is Latin for this, for that, which is typically a supervisor telling one of their employees, hey, if you go out on a date with me, I'll give you a promotion. Or if you don't go out on a date with me, you're going to be fired or demoted. I always think of the Farger versus City of Boca Raton case, right? Where she was a lifeguard and the supervisor was like, well, if you go out on a date with me, you won't have to clean the bathrooms, right? And so that's the number one quid pro quo. We hear that a lot in harassment cases. And then the other one, I guess you want to jump in on the other one.
Yeah, the other one is hostile work environment, where that situation created in the workplace, either by other employees or a manager, that makes work life uncomfortable for a particular employee or group employee. So quid pro quo and hostile work environment are usually the 2 main
hostile
things.
Work environment is when it's severe and pervasive.
Yes.
It caused a change in the job situation, right? And so kind of paying attention to that. So I'm really interested to hear the twist that you're bringing today, right? Because I don't want listeners to be like, oh, sexual harassment, they've covered that. I'm going to turn it off now. What's the twist? Tell us the twist. Keep us going, Chuck. Keep us listening. What's going on?
So it's third-party harassment, and that's where 2 people are conversing, and third person might have a concern or feel harassed, even though they're not the target of the harassment. So that's usually related to hostile work environment, and that is usually the most common form of third party. But in this case, today's story deals with a different type of third-party harassment. And what we're talking about here is third party as in separate companies. And a lot of our stories and examples we see are based within the same company. But the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, for our newer listeners, is very clear that employers must protect their employees from customers, clients, vendors, and visitors. Basically, third-party people that are not part of a company from other companies that are doing business with your company.
Oh, yeah. Oh, in fact, it's funny, Chuck. I was just doing one of my classes. I did it this week. I did it the week before. And we were talking about one of these cases that came up. And I think this is what you're talking about. So let me tell the story and then tell me if this is what you're talking about. So in this case, this was in a grocery store chain. I'm not going to get into the details of what grocery store chain it was in, but one of the customers would come in and sexually touch the female cashiers. And so it would touch them, make comments, doing that. And so what happened was, in this particular case, the female cash registers ended up going to the manager and saying, look, you have to do something about this customer. We know this is a regular customer. We know this is an important customer, but this is unacceptable in the workplace. Well, the manager didn't do anything. It got so bad, right? It got so bad that one of the female cashiers called the police, and the police came out and charged the guy with trespassing. And that was signed by the manager. I don't know all the legal ramifications there, but it was signed the manager. The person was no longer welcomed in there. About a month later, this person was coming back doing the same thing. And so obviously these female cashiers got frustrated, ended up calling the EEOC. The company had to pay $50,000 to settle the sexual harassment lawsuit.
Yeah.
And so is that what you're trying to get to?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's great. This is something very similar to that, and has to do with, in this case, a supervisor that worked for a company. In fact, this one was UPS, and she was dealing with the business agent of a union, Teamsters 455 in Colorado. See, she was not a union employee. And in fact, she was not even a member of the union. She was a supervisor manager for UPS, and she had to deal with the business agent of the union. And John, they've kind of kept this under wraps. It's a hard story to get any real details out of, so I don't know the names. They've kept the names out of it, but I have been able to discern some facts. But she was trying to discuss matters between the company and the union, and that's basically our story today.
All right, I'm interested in this story and how it played out, and what was the end? How did it end? Like, what was the ending on there?
Oh, sure.
So tell me more. Dive into it. Give me more.
Sure. So in September 2020, it was a male business agent for Teamsters Union Local 455. They were a certified collective bargaining representative with locations in Denver and Fort Morgan, Colorado, and a UPS supervisor for the district area met. And during that meeting, he asked the other people to leave the office. And I believe this might have happened at the union headquarters, because he was able to ask all the people to leave, and it just left him and this supervisor. So the female supervisor thought, okay, we're going to continue the business discussions, but then he corners her at the desk, propositions her for sex in the office with the blinds closed, the doors locked. He raises her hand, he ran his hand up her thigh, proceeded to spread his legs. Sorry, folks, I'm getting graphic here, but this is from the press release and the lawsuit. He proceeds to spread his legs and touch his private parts in front of her. It's a crazy story, but we might think, oh, she just made this up. So it gets even more deep. You see, on the next day and a half, the supervisor, UPS supervisor, reports the incident to UPS officials. And then they notify the Teamsters. And apparently the Teamsters union had previously been aware of this similar conduct by their business agent, who, by the way, reports directly to the union president. But according to the EEOC lawsuit, the Teamsters, and this isn't a problem she had with UPS, not with her employer, but it was with the Teamsters. The Teamsters failed to take appropriate remedial measures despite being placed on notice. Get this, 2 other prior incidents against women that this union boss had, I guess, propagated against them.
So do we know, I mean, you might not know because I know this has been really kind of kept secret, but do we know if those women were female union workers or part of the union or were they just maybe representatives of other companies?
Yeah, I haven't been able to get in any further information on who those other two females were, but it was definite, legitimate that there had been two other complaints from women about this union business agents' behavior. So
I mean, we tell these stories all the time, and I shouldn't be surprised about how badly people behave in the workplace.
Yeah.
But I'm still surprised. Like, that is shocking to me that somebody has the audacity to say, everyone out of this room, lock the door. I don't know, go on. So what's going on? So what happened?
Well,
what was the next step?
About this time, sometimes people will be thinking, oh, well, how are people supposed to meet at work? Aren't we supposed to, people go out with each other. They work with coworkers. They meet people there. Okay. That's different. You see, this actually went to the next level because this UPS supervisor, female supervisor, was pretty upset because it went beyond just harassment. And she went beyond complaining to the company. She actually filed charges with the Boulder Police Department. So opened up a criminal investigation too. Ultimately, the Teamsters agent actually pled guilty to the criminal charge in Boulder County Court. And John, you and I talk about this all the time, that you may think, oh, I'm just getting sexual harassment, I might get a slap on the wrist. No, you could you could be in legal hot water for this stuff. Yeah. And he was convicted. He got an 18-month probation sentence. He had community service. He had to write a letter of apology, and they put a restraining order. Also, he lost his job. I was able to find that out. He did lose his job. And ultimately, the Teamsters Union number 455 had to pay an $85,000 fine and provide, as we know, these things happen, other relief. It's not just about the money. So they had to review and update their anti-discrimination policies to include strong, clear commitment to preventing unlawful sex discrimination and sexual harassment. It had to provide training to its officers, agents, and employees, and had to post an informational flyer about workplace sexual harassment at its Colorado office locations, on bulletin boards, and at other business locations where members of 455 are employed. So 455 Teamsters represents all kind of other employees at all other companies. They had to put this notice on their bulletin boards too. So I do like this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting, right? Because unions are organizations, and they fall under some of these same laws, right? I mean, the laws and regulations are there for that union well, and you can see when you read these laws, they say employer and organizations and unions, and right, and so they have to follow those laws as well. So
yeah, and I like this story because it showcases a different side of third-party harassment. The person being harassed was not an employee. They were not a union member. They were an employee of a separate business. And it also highlights that if you're going to harass, or if you're being harassed and you're being touched, that may be a point that it could lead to criminal charges. So it was not this guy's day that day. Obviously.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I can't get in there, but
he messed with the wrong person. Messed with the wrong person.
Yeah. I mean, you think about to me, okay, so let's just kind of go back. Yes, this terrible thing happened, but now I go back, right? So here I am, this female employee, and I go back to UPS and I say, hey, this is happening. It's a little hard for UPS to separate itself from the union, right? Because what I recommend to my clients and people in my classes, I always tell them, look, you may have to lose that client if they're sexually harassing your store. Like, you may have to fire them as a client.
Absolutely.
It's a little harder for UPS to fire the union in that case. And obviously, my expectation is there was a conversation between UPS and the president Teamster going, this cannot happen. You need to do something. They need to lose their job. Otherwise, there's going to be this major lawsuit, right? I'm assuming. I don't know. We don't know that, but I think that's something that plays out within this particular case.
Yes. Yeah, there was probably a lot of things we don't know back and forth, but ultimately the person lost their job, pled guilty to criminal charges, and the Teamsters Union had to pay $85,000 in fines. So,
yeah. And I mean, I think the big thing is, again, they should be doing this anyway, but training people, informing them, doing all of that, right? There's lots of different members and making sure they know not to do that. And I think what happens in these cases is that the employees or the union members in this case, they get frustrated because they're like, I know this, but now I have to go to this training, and it makes the organization, right? So let's say this was an executive and an employee organization. It makes people not want to be there, right? Like, well, I don't want to work in that organization. If you're allowing this to happen, kind of pay attention.
Yeah. Look, my final word on this, John, and then I'll turn it over to you if you have any final thoughts, is that the UPS and the local union 455 case and the earlier one that I shared about the actress spokesperson that was working for this this resort all highlight that businesses have to be responsible and must take reasonable care to protect employees, clients, customers from unwanted sexual advances and harassment. Drop the mic. There's really no debate about that.
Yeah, and I think I want to give some people some practical advice on this, because I think sometimes it can be hard for employees when they're in that position to come back to their supervisor, come back to their HR department and say something, right? Because if I go to a client's business and they sexually harass me, I don't want the company to lose. I don't want to look like I'm making the company lose business because I've suffered a little harm, right? And so again, I get it. It's not a little harm. I'm paraphrasing there. I get it that it's a major issue.
Yeah.
But I think as employers and HR professionals, we need to do more than everything work okay with that client. Right? Is everything going on? We need to go in there and like, hey, just so you know, this is what we expect. When you go to a client's business, you go to a client's house, these are the things that we expect to happen. If anything goes beyond that, we want you to come to us immediately. Ideally, if you can get somebody that's already experienced that in the workplace, who came to you and it was taken care of, to talk about their story, more people will then be willing to come through, because it's showing you as the employer care about your employees, and that's more important to you than having them harassed.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing, which Chuck's been telling us. If we don't care about our employees and we allow them to get harassed, we're going to end up in court.
Yeah.
And that's
like that.
That's really kind of the point there.
I like that. And I like that. It's the training. If you have employees that regularly work with employees of other companies, maybe even, interact with them off property at different events, a training, a position statement, some sort of policy as to how to interact and how to report and how to expect to be treated should be included. Great point, John, co-host and co-founder of the HR Stories podcast. I love it. John, you got anything else to wrap up and send our listeners off today?
I think that's it. It was a very interesting story. I'm glad you brought it to our attention. I will say our next episode, we're going to be we're not going to turn the mics over, but we're going to be turning the subject matter over to our employees. So we're going to be talking, our audience members, we're going to be talking to employees. We want you guys, HR professionals, we want you to come in because I think it'll be helpful for you, but we're going to really reach out and want to talk to employees about their rights in the workplace and what they should be doing. So we got that episode up online. Hopefully, if I can talk Chuck into it, we're going to be doing it twice. So we'll do it 2 times. 2 episodes.
So kind of an employee edition episode again.
Yeah.
I love that.
Employee edition episode. So.
All right, folks, if you like what you're hearing on the HR Stories podcast, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please rate us. Please make a comment. All of those things matter. Check out our website, team@hrstories.com, team@hrstories.com. Check out our new book. People love this book. It is extremely helpful. The Ultimate Book of HR Checklists. You can find that at hrchecklists.com, hrchecklists.com. And that's it. Thanks for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story.
Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast. The material presented in this podcast is for informational purposes only. Chuck and John always recommend using an employment lawyer or HR consultant to handle any legal concerns or HR issues. We do our best to double check sources and make sure the information we are providing is accurate. We may eliminate or embellish without changing the basic narrative to make the story easier to understand. In certain circumstances, we may change identifying information to protect the innocent. The HR Stories broadcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories is designed to help anyone with HR responsibilities be better at managing the employee experience. To engage with us, go to the hrstoriesteam.com and learn more about how the team at HR Stories can support your business or nonprofit. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story.